Hello, everybody. I'm Rick Uzzi. It's not Tech Tuesday because it's not Tuesday, but today and starting today and for future days, I'm going to be doing live streams about the Broadband Infrastructure Project or Infrastructure Act, that's hard to say, that just passed earlier this week. Congress passed it after a little bit of delay, and then President Biden passed it, or signed it, I should say, on Monday. And I'm going to be doing these live streams every day. So I will be right back, and we will talk about just a few of the details of that act. See you in just a moment. Again, thanks for joining me. So today is my first live stream. I'm not going to do these at any particular time. So this is my first live stream, just kind of off the cuff at a particular time during the day. And I want to mention that yesterday on Tech Tuesday, which many of you may be familiar with, I actually did a fairly detailed presentation on this new infrastructure bill. I talked about what's in there, some of the things to be looking for, and I will post a link to that in the comments here. But each day I'm going to kind of see if there's anything else I can bring to this conversation. If there's any significant news coming out, I'll certainly mention that, or I'll try to dig deeper on some of the things that are related to this. I know a lot of the people that would tune into this channel are interested in broadband, therefore you'd be interested in broadband infrastructure. And this particular bill, this act, has got a lot of money. There's over $42 billion that's going to be allocated to various groups, mostly the states, but then the states from there can do subgrants to your normal kind of service providers and others, municipalities, EMCs. So we will be following that very closely, and again, I'll be reporting on that daily. So if you join me, that's what today is about. So I did want to just show one thing today that I just happened to thought was pretty interesting. So this is a site called Broadband USA, and this is part of the NTIA. That's the National Telecommunications and Information Administration, and this is the agency that is actually responsible for managing this whole thing. These are the folks that are going to be working with what they call eligible entities, which are primarily going to be states and territories that are then going to get these funds and then provide that to the subgrantees. Those would be your service providers, your cities, electric utilities, whoever else is going to be providing broadband in an area. So NTIA are the folks that are managing this, and they've got a very nice website up that they've had up for a while, I believe. So it's broadbandusa.ntia.doc.gov. And I'll go ahead and link to this as well in the comments when I'm done. But there's a lot of information up here, and this is different from their normal NTIA site, which is not quite as interesting. So it's not as nice looking. It's a nice site, though, actually, for a government site. But you can see here they've got some featured initiatives, and they've got the Broadband USA link up here. They've got some other things, 5G, National Broadband Availability Map. I'm going to go over that one day. I'll talk about the mapping that they've got. So this is their normal site, but I think this Broadband USA site is, again, very nice and very helpful. So let's talk about this a little bit. If you go down here on the home page, this may be on the home page. No, this is on grant programs. On the grants overview here, you'll see what we were talking about, what I was talking about yesterday, and what's the big news is this Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the IIJA. And under that is a lot of money under this Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program for broadband. So this whole act, $1 trillion act, has got all kinds of infrastructure in it, water, everything else. I mean, all kinds of roads, bridges, those kinds of things. But there's specifically $65 billion in broadband, and then under this BEAD program, there's $42.45 billion in broadband. So the $65 billion broadband is to help close the digital divide and ensure that all Americans have access to reliable, high-speed, and affordable broadband. So they're trying to attack all of those things. They want to make sure it's reliable, meaning something that's going to be up reliably, and then also high speed, obviously. So they want to look at minimum speeds, but hoping that people will put in infrastructure that will support speeds that can grow. So there's language in there about that. And affordable broadband. They want to make sure that this is as affordable as possible for consumers so that everybody can get it. So again, I'll link to what I talked about yesterday, which I go through some of those things in a little bit more detail. But this is a good summary today also. And there's a few new things in here that I thought I'd point out. So things that I learned. So again, we've got the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, or they call it BEAD for short. That's the $42.45 billion for states, territories, and the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico to utilize for broadband deployment. mapping, and adoption projects. Each state, DC, and PR will receive an initial allocation of $100 million, and $100 million will be divided equally among these U.S. territories that you see here, the Virgin Islands, Guam, American Samoa, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands. And something that I was not, as I was reading through the Act, it wasn't really clear, but it's more clear here. It says, leveraging initial planning funds that will be made available through the program will submit a 5-year action plan, which shall be informed by collaboration with local regional entities. So this initial, I believe this initial allocation will be used to basically do some of the planning and get things in place prior to, let's say, the funds being released to actually start doing the broadband deployment. And they talk, in the Act, it talks about unserved areas, and I covered this yesterday. Unserved areas, those below 25.3, they're going to be attacking that first, and then underserved areas, those below 120 megabits per second, and then also community anchor institutions, libraries, schools, other kinds of what else was there? I can't remember. There's a list that I went over yesterday. 1.1 or 1 by 1 gigabit per second, so gigabit up and down. Then there's some other things I didn't mention yesterday, but these are in there. So there's some money for enabling middle mile broadband infrastructure, right? That's important. So you can go ahead and enable your broadband down to the end user, last mile kinds of stuff from a service provider to the end user, but you also need middle mile sometimes to get all of that aggregated back to one place to get it out to the internet backbone, and that's what they're doing here. It doesn't seem like much. It's $1 billion, but when you're talking about trillions, and then in this case 42 billion, for just the broadband part, it's still a lot of money. So $1 billion for construction, improvement, or acquisition of middle mile infrastructure to reduce the cost of connecting unserved and underserved areas to the internet backbone. So once you go out and connect these areas, you need to get that all back to a centralized point. There's some tribal broadband connectivity program in here, provides an additional $2 billion to that, previously implemented under the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021. And there's the Digital Equity Act programs. They dedicate $2.75 billion to that, and that's to establish 3 grant programs that promote digital inclusion and equity to ensure that all individuals, communities have the skills, technology, and capacity needed to reap the full benefits of our digital economy. So that would include, here it says, low-income households, aging populations, incarcerated individuals, veterans, individuals with disabilities, individuals with language barrier, racial and ethnic minorities, and rural inhabitants. So really anybody where it could maybe be difficult for them to either get internet or to use internet. I was just thinking of aging populations. Well, a lot of people my age are aging, obviously, and we use the internet now. I think this is a more of an issue for those people that were maybe old already and had not really experienced the internet. So maybe there's some training involved there, set up some things to help those populations get access to the internet or maybe use it more efficiently. State Digital Equity Planning Grant Program, $60 million formula grant program for states and territories to develop digital equity plans. So develop the plan, $60 million, and then you've got State Digital Equity Capacity Grant Programs, $1.44 billion grant for states and territories distributed via annual grant programs over 5 years to implement those plans, implement digital equity projects, and support the implementation of digital equity plans. And then Digital Equity Competitive Grant Program, that's $1.25 billion discretionary grant program distributed via annual grant programs over 5 years to implement digital equity projects. And it mentions some of the eligible applicants here. That includes specific types of political subdivision, agency, or instrumentality of the state, tribal governments, nonprofit entities, community anchor institutions, local educational agencies, and entities that carry out workforce development programs. So that's kind of a summary of some of the things that are in the program. I thought that would be good to go through today. And then this is also good here. This on the same site, it says, what is NTIA's role basically in implementing this program? And with the passage of this, oh, by the way, I was going to show this. So there's a couple of places in here where it links to this act, and what that looks like is this. So to link you to this particular act, and you've got a summary right here. But if you are interested in reading the text of this, all however many, who knows how many pages, you can click the little text tab right there, and then you will get the text right here, and it is a whole bunch of pages, but it's not all about broadband. So if you were interested in the broadband part, what I would do is I would just hit Control F on your keyboard and type in broadband, and that will take you to the very first instance of that. And here's really, I think, what you're primarily looking for. That would be broadband grants for states, District of Columbia, etc. I would copy that, put that in here, and now I'm going to search on that, and there's two instances of that. That would be in the table of contents that I was just looking at, and then when you go to the second instance, it's going to bring you right here. And then you get all the wonderful government stuff. You know, that looks like a contract because it's written in that way with all of your sections and your subsections and your paragraphs. And sometimes it's hard as you're reading this, as you go through, to figure out, because it refers to you know, a subsection B1, and you're trying to figure out what B1 is that, because there's so many B's and C's and whatever in here. But if you want to read the Act, specifically the broadband part, you can go there, and again, I'll link to this. And that's the easiest way to find it. Look for broadband, and then once you find broadband, type in just this, or just copy and paste this part of it, and it'll take you right down to where you want to be. And that continues for some time. You'll see, you can't really see that, but I'm down in the document somewhere. I don't know if you can see my arrow. Yeah, I'm down in the document somewhere about here. So it goes all the way up. A little slider goes all the way up. So it's a lot of words right there. But that's where you can find that. So again, that's a link right here as well on that. So this was something that I just wanted to point out here. Again, this was something that I thought I learned as I was reading this. So the NTIA will establish 6 broadband programs. The Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Program, or BEAD, is the biggest, and that provides the $42.45 billion. And then here's where this clarified this for me. Eligible entities will receive initial funds to support broadband planning and related capacity efforts, from mapping, staffing state territory broadband offices, to outreach and coordination with local communities. So that's their initial funds. And that maybe that's the $100 million that each state's going to get. After preliminary planning phase, and once the FCC releases location-based mapping of broadband availability, the remaining funds will be allocated based on a formula that considers the number of unserved and high-cost locations in the state. States and territories will then propose projects that meet the statutory priorities. First priority being funding to provide broadband to unserved areas, again, those below 25 by 3, followed by underserved areas, those below 100 by 20, and then serving the community anchor institutions. So it does, at first it was kind of confusing as to whether the states would get any money prior to the broadband maps becoming available, because the NTIA has 6 months before they send out the first notice that inviting people to request funds. So they've got 6 months to do that. The mapping hopefully will be done before that, but they can't release any funds until those maps are done. So it was kind of confusing for me, but it sounds like the states will be able to get some initial funds to be able to get the planning in place in order to do this. Because again, a lot of these states don't have broadband offices. They're going to need to develop that. A lot of states have been good about that. They've been working with the federal government. They've been getting funds, and they've got broadband offices. But if they don't, this will give them an opportunity to create that. If they do, we'll give them an opportunity to expand that, to hire people. So that I think will be good. Then down here, there's just some additional funding for broadband in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Additionally, it allocates funding for programs run by the FCC and the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So these are programs that are kind of already in place, but it's giving additional funding. $2 billion will be appropriated for the U.S. Department of Agriculture's Rural Utility Service Distance Learning, Telemedicine, and Broadband Program, under which recipients are eligible to utilize $5 million of their award, the establishment and growth of cooperatives to offer broadband. And then, in an extension of an FCC program to provide direct subsidies to qualifying households for the purchase of broadband service, the FCC's Affordable Connectivity Fund will receive an appropriation of $14.2 billion. So that is to supplement or add or extend, I should say, the emergency broadband benefit that was put in place with COVID kinds of relief, in order to make it more affordable for people to get broadband. So this will help extend the amount of that. I believe the amount currently is $50. I believe under this program it's going to drop down to $30. So there's still a subsidy as they use these funds to extend that, but it's going to go from $50 that a eligible household can get for broadband down to $30. That's still a pretty good amount. And I think part of the reasoning or the thinking is there that as the government provides these funds to make broadband more affordable, as maybe there are more competitors that come into place, or as there's money that's put towards making this happen, then the service providers can get their price down to something that's a little bit lower than it is today. So then in addition to that, these eligible households can get $30 as part of this program. All right, well, that's all I have to talk about today. So thanks for joining me. We are a provider of broadband services. So if you ever need something like that, give us a call. I don't have, actually I don't have I'm going to use my normal Tech Tuesday overlay on this. I don't have one yet I'll make one new for these daily things that I'm doing. But you've got our website here, our email address, and our phone number. If you're interested in any broadband services, whether that be pre-deployment, deployment, engineering, feasibility studies, construction, those kinds of things, let us know. We'll be happy to help you, as well as services after the fact. So we provide, for example, outsourced help desk services, provisioning of end-user devices, hosted subscriber email if you want that. A lot of times you got to think about, well, let's see, am I going to have to worry about CALIA? We can help you with that. What about IPv4 and IPv6 addresses? What do I do there? We can help you with that. Diagnostics for your fiber or DOCSIS network, those kinds of things. So make sure that you give us a call if you're interested in that. So thanks for joining me today. And again, I'll be back regularly every day, not necessarily the same time like Tech Tuesday. So I will be back tomorrow at some point. And if you subscribe, go ahead and click the subscribe button on YouTube, and then click the little bell. Click the bell, select all for notifications, and then you'll be notified when I'm live. So if this is a topic of interest to you, then you'll get an email when I'm live, and then you'll be able to join me. You can always watch these after the recorded version as well. So if you get that email, can't watch live, just click it later, and you'll be able to watch it then. So thanks again for joining me, and I will see you next time. That could be tomorrow if you're watching. Thanks. Bye-bye.